I did the experiment. So I did 90 days of carnivore, and a couple of interesting things happened. I dropped 6% body fat, meaning a total of 6% body fat reduction during the 90 days. And I didn't even realize that I needed to lose those 6% body fat, but my body did it. So I got really lean. My abs got more defined. I lost 16 pounds in the 90 days as well. So 6% body fat, 16 pounds. Everything in my gut microbiome improved. My diversity improved. Not just that, 7 core bacteria showed up on my day 90 test that did not show up on day 1, and 5 keystone bacteria showed up on day 90 that was not there on day 1, doing the complete opposite of what most people think you need to do to improve gut health. So overall, my HRV improved, my deep sleep improved. I got more REM sleep, which is more for rapid eye movement sleep, more for memory processing, short-term memory to long-term memory. So my LDL on day 1, I believe was around 250, which was still pretty high because I was still doing more of a keto saturated fat approach. On day 90, it went up to 350, super high. Oh my gosh. However,
when it comes to the ketogenic diet, what are the biggest mistakes you see people making that are sabotaging the results?
Well, the biggest mistake is looking at it as a diet. Although keto technically can be a diet, it's more of a metabolic process. So I think a lot of people who go into keto, Jesse, they go into it looking to lose weight. I'm going to use this as a diet to lose weight. And yes, it could help you do that for sure. But I think a lot of people don't know that it's actually a metabolic process that we're all designed to use. Ketones are simply a byproduct of burning stored fat. And there's nothing new about keto. It's just new or nuanced to some people, but it's been around for as long as humans have existed. As a matter of fact, it's one of the reasons why we exist today, because our ancestors didn't have food readily available, right? So they had to rely on their stored energy, their body fat, as a fuel source, and then they produce ketones to fuel the brain to get through those times of famine. So a big mistake is going into it thinking that it's just going to be used for a diet. And it's not going away because it's a metabolic process. Another big mistake people make is they eat the wrong fats on keto. Just because a food is keto friendly doesn't necessarily make it healthy or health friendly. So I see a lot of people who do keto and they're eating these inflammatory fats. You've done a lot of interviews on your show on this topic of seed oils. And these seed oils are all over the place. They're in about 80% of our food supply in the United States. But in the keto space, a lot of people eat them because they're keto friendly. They're fats, but they're highly unstable and arguably more inflammatory than if you didn't do keto and ate a whole bunch of processed sugar. And the reason I say that is because these polyunsaturated fats, these vegetable oils, they stay stuck in your body for a very long time. The half-life is about 680 days. This means if we stopped eating these bad fats today, and I'll give your audience an entire list in a minute, if we stopped eating them today, about 2 years later, Jesse, half of them will still be in our body fat, around our cell membranes, our mitochondrial membranes, creating inflammation, which we know leads to chronic disease, insulin resistance, diabetes, cancer, heart disease. A lot of bad things happen when these fats are stored in your body fat. And these fats are very unstable because of the chemical structure. They're called polyunsaturated fatty acids. The word poly means many. So these fats contain many double bonds. The more double bonds a fat has in its chemical structure, the more reactive and aggressive it attracts oxygen. So the way these fats are processed are with oxygen and heat, and they react to oxygen and heat, not to mention the chemicals that are put into these fats, and it makes them rancid. It makes them go bad. Then we eat them, we heat them up, and then we eat them, and it makes them even more rancid. So it's similar to biting into an apple, leaving that apple on the counter, coming back 2-3 hours later. What happens to the apple? It turns brown. It starts to rust. This is similar to what's happening at our cellular level when we have these seed oils. So the list of them, the bad fats, and I'll give the healthier swaps on keto, are going to be canola, corn, and cottonseed oil, soybean, safflower, and sunflower oil, rice bran oil, and grapeseed oil. Now, I would throw one more into the mix here, Jesse, that might be controversial, but I would also throw in fish oil into the classification of bad fats. Although it's not necessarily a seed oil, it's also a polyunsaturated fat, an omega-3 that's very unstable as well. And most fish oil is not processed properly. It's already rancid before we even consume it. And fish oil in general causes more inflammation than it does to create anti-inflammation or lower inflammation. So instead, on keto, or even if you're not doing keto, we want to swap to saturated and monounsaturated fats. These are much more stable fats. Saturated fats contain zero double bonds, very stable. It actually makes the composition of our cell membranes, which I believe are the intelligence of our cells, contain saturated fat, protein, and cholesterol. It's the building blocks of our cells. And then so that's going to be butter, ghee, coconut oil, beef tallow, duck fat. These are saturated animal fats, typically, with the exception of coconut oil. Then we have monounsaturated fats, which contain one double bond, still more stable than the polyunsaturated fats. These are going to be fruit-based fats like avocado oil and olive oil. These are better for salad dressings and dips. And that's a big mistake people make on keto. They're eating a lot of keto-friendly foods that contain these bad fats. So I would say those are the two biggest mistakes people make, going into it thinking it's a diet, but it's a metabolic process, and then eating the wrong fats.
You mentioned the length of time that these bad fats stay in the body. I think you said 2 years or even longer. For somebody that has been unaware of this, or at least not mindfully eating and avoiding these, anything we can do to speed up that process and get back to baseline?
Yeah, it's a great question. And yes, the good news is that you can speed up the process. Achieving autophagy, activating autophagy helps you get rid of these bad fats faster. Of course, autophagy is the cellular cleanup process where your body goes into this cleanup mode. And the analogy I give for autophagy is a refrigerator. Imagine this refrigerator. You open up that refrigerator and you have all these groceries inside of the refrigerator that all have expiration dates on them. Imagine if you left all the groceries in your fridge, let them expire, but instead of throwing away the expired groceries, you kind of just shove them toward the back of the fridge, buy new groceries, put them in front of the expired groceries, close the door, and then come back the next day and open up that refrigerator. It's going to be nasty. It's going to be a toxic environment. The human body is like this refrigerator. We have cells, proteins, mitochondria that all have expiration dates on them. Autophagy is a process that's activated through fasting and exercise and certain supplements called senolytics that allow your body to clean out the junk, including these bad fats. So fasting is a great way to clear out some of these bad fats. But I would also adding in quality fats at the same time, adding in the saturated fats, the monounsaturated fats, because as your body cleans out the cells and starts replacing things, it starts to replace them with the good fats. So if you combine a good fasting schedule with the clean fats, you're going to clean those out much faster than that 2-year half-life.
When you were talking about bad fats, you brought in fish oil as a specific example there that we need to be careful with. Are there any brands you've come across? And obviously you have the fragile nature of these fats that we can't get around. That's just the structure. But different qualities of fish oil, have you found any that for somebody that's going to include that as part of their healthy routine can still be an overall win?
I'm a big fan of actually eating the fish as opposed to taking the fish oil supplement, because you're right, Jesse. There are some companies like Carlson's Labs and Nordic Naturals, I believe they're called, that process these fish oils much better. They're testing for heavy metals. They're using cold processing, and they do a really good job. And I respect that. And it's preserving that oil in the capsule. So it's not rancid. Like 83% of them are usually rancid before you consume it. But some companies do it the right way. But there's a problem. There's a few problems here with taking the fish oil supplement. First problem is this. Fish oil needs to be stored in cool temperatures. It's essentially antifreeze for fish. That's what fish oil is. And our human body is really warm, 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. So when we take this quality fat in a fish oil supplement and we consume it, and it mixes with our stomach acid, it mixes with our warm body temperature, converts it to a bad fat. That's one problem. Another problem, Jesse, is the amount of EPA and DHA that people are taking from fish oil. And that's the main reason why we take it, because EPA and DHA are anti-inflammatory, omega-3 fats, great for the eyes, great for the brain, great for overall inflammation. But the body doesn't need that much EPA and DHA. According to the National Institutes of Health, a male human person, a male at 6 foot tall, they only require about 7.2 milligrams of EPA each day for the brain. One capsule of fish oil on average is about 1,000 milligrams of EPA and DHA. People are taking 1, 2, 3, 4 capsules per day. It's a super physiological overdose of fish oil, of EPA and DHA. And what this does, it creates a fluid, leaky cell membrane where that's not good. We don't want a rigid cell membrane where things can't get in, like hormones and nutrients. And we don't want too fluid of a membrane because it starts to disrupt the mitochondria and the processes for the mitochondria. If we just ate small fatty fish, salmon, sardines, anchovies, the smaller the fish, the better, less toxins. If we just ate fish at least once a week, we would get enough EPA and DHA to thrive, to get all the benefits that we need from it. So I don't take them. Arguably, there is a short-term benefit to taking some EPA and DHA, especially for somebody who's deprived and they have such a high omega-6 to omega-3 balance. But long-term, it's a problem. And there was a study done by the Cochrane Collaboration. The Cochrane Collaboration does a really good job at looking all of the studies done on a certain supplement or topic. In this case, it was on fish oil. And they reviewed thousands of studies because there are some studies showing benefits to fish oil. And there are studies showing that it could be harmful, and there are studies showing that it does nothing. And at the end of this study, it showed the Cochrane Collaboration, and we could put in the notes that there's pretty much no benefits to taking fish oil, and it could actually be harmful. That was their conclusion, right? So I'm a fan of fish oil when it's in the fish. I'm a fan of vegetable oil when it's in the vegetable, but I'm not a fan when you extract it and put it into a capsule.
All right. You're a fan of fish. You mentioned once a week. Do you feel that should be prescriptive for people to get enough omega-3s? Or do you feel getting enough animals in the diet and things like beef are going to provide enough omega-3s through that source?
It's a really good question. And the answer depends on the quality of the beef they're getting, right? If it's grass-fed, grass-finished, it'll have a healthier balance of omega-6 to omega-3. It'll have more omega-3 fats. And arguably, you could probably get away with eating grass-fed, grass-finished red meat and not have to consume the fish in order to get the healthy omega-3s. But if you're eating grain-fed meat that's kind of devoid of these omega-3 fats, then you might need to either have some eggs, which also have omega-3 fats, or consume the fatty fish.
All right. Let's talk about what a typical day of eating is for you. Give people the lay of the land. If keto is new to them, what 24 hours would look like.
So what it would look like for somebody who's new to keto, or what it looks like for me, or both?
Well, let's do you first, and then we can pivot off that.
So I'm a little bit more advanced, and then we'll kind of pivot off of what I'm doing. I pretty much do, Jesse, mostly a carnivore diet. And I would say 6 days out of the week, Monday through Saturday, I eat animal-based. I eat carnivore. So I'm eating steak, red meat, lamb. I'm eating eggs. So today, for example, right before I hopped on this interview with you, I had eggs with goat cheese cooked in butter. That was my lunch. Later on, I'll have a piece of steak. That's what I typically do Monday through Saturday. Now on Sunday, I flex out of keto. I flex out of carnivore. And it's actually a higher healthy carb day for me, where I'll have upwards of 300 grams of carbs, lower fat that day. I'll have some low oxalate vegetables. I'll have maybe fruit, white rice, but I've done the work to kind of build up my metabolism to do this sort of flex. So it's different what I'm doing versus somebody who's new. So I would say 90% of the time, Jesse, I'm carnivore. 10% of the time I flex out. That's my current routine.
And when it comes to this flex piece, is that for being social, having diversity within the diet? Or do you look at that as an integral piece of maintaining your health?
All of that for sure, right? The social part is important, right? So I'll usually designate a flex day for a social day or a social event. It makes it a lot easier. And the diversity part is also important. We get so used to eating the same foods over and over again. And we're just not designed to do that. We're designed to eat different types of foods. Of course, eat in season if you can, but creating a change in your nutrition, eating different foods creates a stress to the gut microbiome, which is a good stress, creates more diversity. So I like the change up. And then overall health. I'm a big fan of metabolic flexibility. I think that is the name of the game for longevity and anti-aging and burning fat. It's this metabolic flexibility, which means our metabolism is designed to burn whatever substrate is available, whether it's burning carbs, sugar, fat, ketones, and doing both, going back and forth, right? So I love keto, but I'm not a big advocate of long-term continuous ketosis. I'm a fan of going in and out. Now, 93% of Americans are stuck burning sugar. They're metabolically inflexible, metabolically handcuffed. They have forgotten how to burn fat. They're in a keto deficiency, and they really need this metabolic process of ketosis. So we use it. We get them fat adapted and then keto adapted, which typically takes about 8 to 12 weeks. At that point, we decide if we want to flex out and have that higher healthy carb day where we could remind the metabolism we have a different fuel source for this day. We're going to burn sugar instead of fat. And then you burn sugar for a day, and then you're back to burning fat for the rest of the week. Now, if you've done this the right way, like I have personally, after having 300 grams of carbs on a Sunday, Jesse, Monday afternoon, I'm right back into ketosis, right? That is a sign of metabolic flexibility. I think that is the key also for longevity as well.
And for you coming to this point within your diet and lifestyle and having this one day of higher carb, was that something you learned the hard way over the years? Were you ever somebody that was ketosis 24/7 and then had certain challenges and then pivoted to this? Or have you always gone to this more balanced approach?
I was definitely dogmatic about keto when I started doing it for myself and then teaching it to my clients back in late 2013 is when I got into ketosis. At this time, I owned a CrossFit gym here in Miami, so I was training really hard, doing keto, mineral depleted, electrolyte depleted, like all the things that come with long-term ketosis and heavy training. But I thought keto was like the solution. I thought it was the end all be all. I was telling everybody about keto. I was really dogmatic. I put myself in a box. So I stuck with it for over a year. And I realized, man, maybe this is too aggressive. Maybe I need to do some things to change it up and have a day where I'll have some healthy carbs or time some carbs before a workout. So I kind of learned through experimenting with it. And then, of course, working with thousands of people, and I've taken over 5,000 people through my Keto Kamp Academy. I've gotten data from them, right? So I've learned that women, for example, who have a menstrual cycle, need to do more flexing than men. Men could be more aggressive, and postmenopausal women could also be more aggressive. So it's always different depending on the person. But I learned the hard way, being the guinea pig, and then using data from a lot of my students from all across the world.
All right, coming back to the beginner, somebody that this is brand new, you mentioned a number of weeks of staying in ketosis to become metabolically flexible. How many weeks was that?
About 8 to 12 weeks on average gets you what's called keto adapted. And I'll unpack what I mean by that. So the first goal is to get fat adapted, Jesse. As I mentioned, 93% of people are sugar burners. They're stuck burning sugar and glucose, highly inflammatory. It'll age you faster than anything else if you're stuck burning sugar. We get them fat adapted. It takes about 7 to 10 days to get them into a fat burning state. We do this by first step is gradually decreasing your total carbohydrates. The average person is consuming about 300 grams of carbs per day. In order to get into ketosis and get fat adapted, that needs to be dropped under 50 total grams of carbs per day for most people. But I don't like doing that in one day. I don't like doing that too quickly because symptoms could result as a result of doing that. So you do a gradual approach of decreasing your carbs under 50 grams per day. You get there about 7 days in, and you start to increase healthy fats, like the fats I mentioned earlier. You start to increase your electrolytes and sea salt to replenish any minerals or electrolytes that are lost as you lower insulin. That'll happen. And then you're fat adapted. And you could verify that by testing your blood ketones. You could use a machine like a Keto Mojo or any kind of device that tests blood ketones where you prick your finger, draw blood, you put that blood on a strip, a ketone strip, put that ketone strip into the meter. And if you register 0.5 millimoles per liter or higher, you're in ketosis, you're now fat adapted. And most people could get there in about 7 to 10 days. Now, this is different, Jesse, than being keto adapted. Keto adaptation takes about 8 to 12 weeks. This is now when you achieve keto adaptation, it's when your mitochondria are now primed to use ketones as the primary energy source. And something really cool happens when you achieve this. These ketones, when your mitochondria are using them as an energy source, the ketones act as a signaling molecule to beneficially stress the mitochondria to create mitochondrial biogenesis, which is the creation of new mitochondria, healthier mitochondria, which is key for anti-aging, biohacking, longevity, fat loss, just feeling great. And you produce 400% more ATP energy when you're a keto adapted versus somebody burning sugar. which is really amazing. So one of the first signs you're going to notice when you're keto adapted is the mental clarity. This is the thing I get from all my students, like, oh my gosh, like I was feeling good already doing keto, but now I feel like my brain is on a different level. I have this mental clarity. I'm productive. I just feel really good. That's a sign of keto adaptation. And typically that takes about 8 to 12 weeks of being in ketosis to get to that point.
You mentioned somebody might want to test along the way to see if they're in ketosis. Is there a certain time of day that we want to do that test? Like first thing in the morning while we're fasted, after a meal, or does it really matter?
Yeah, I like doing it about an hour after waking up. Not necessarily first thing in the morning, because we're going to have a cortisol response just by waking up with the sun. There's a cortisol response. It could alter some of the numbers, but after an hour or so after you wake up, things start to normalize with cortisol. And if you test an hour after waking up, that's a good time to test. I also like testing, as you mentioned, about an hour or two after eating. So that's postprandial to make sure you're still in ketosis. And I also like checking blood sugar levels too. And the cool thing about a machine like the Keto Mojo, it gives you both blood glucose and blood ketones. Blood sugars are an important thing to check. And I'd love to get into that if you want.
Sure, let's continue.
Yeah. So we know that the human body, what's considered an optimal state, is 1 teaspoon of sugar in the entire bloodstream. That's 80 milligrams per deciliters when you're testing your blood sugars, whether it's a finger prick or like a continuous glucose monitor. 80 milligrams per deciliter, which is 1 teaspoon in the bloodstream. That's considered an optimal fasting state. If your blood sugars are higher than that in a fasted state, you're aging faster. We know that excess glucose in the bloodstream, number one, strips nitric oxide from your arteries and from your body, which creates vasoconstriction, which is the narrowing of your arteries. When that happens, your heart has to pump harder and it increases your blood pressure. That leads to high blood pressure. That's a problem. We also know when you have higher levels of blood sugar, you're going to have higher levels of insulin. Now, insulin, and I know you've interviewed so many amazing people on your show, Jesse. We know insulin is a fat storage energy sensing hormone. It's not a bad hormone unless it's elevated, unless it's called all the time. But insulin is a bully hormone. When insulin is elevated, the fat burning hormones are hiding. And here's the thing: insulin levels could be elevated on average for 6 to 14 years before any of the blood sugars or even your A1C changes. 6 to 14 years, you can have insulin resistance. So I believe one of the most important tests that you can get for your metabolism, for health in general, is a fasting insulin blood test. It's cheap, it's easy. And what it's going to show you is if you have insulin resistance, in other words, hyperinsulinemia. We want our fasting insulin to be in the single digits. 3 to 7 is optimal to hit. If you're 12, 15, 17, you have signs of insulin resistance. If you're over 20, you have full-blown insulin resistance, but your blood sugars might look fine. What's happening is your body's trying to overcompensate by producing, your pancreas is producing so much insulin to shuttle the excess blood glucose out of the bloodstream. But that happens for 16 to 14 years. And then all of a sudden, your receptor sites for insulin get burned out and then blood sugars increase. So I love testing blood sugars. I love testing fasting insulin. And one of the things you could also look at with your blood sugars is your postprandial blood sugar levels. This gives you a good sign whether or not you have insulin resistance. So what you want to do is test your blood sugar levels right before you have a meal. Let's say it's 85 milligrams per deciliter. You're fasted before you eat. Great blood sugar level. You eat a meal, and then an hour after eating the meal, you test the blood sugars again. You want to make sure it doesn't go over 120. 2 hours after eating, it should go back to baseline, around 85 in this scenario. That's a good sign that you produced enough insulin, you regulated the glucose, you used it for energy, and you're back to homeostasis. But if you see those blood sugars stay elevated 2 hours later, let's say it's still above 100 2 hours later, that's a problem, right? And just by looking at your blood sugar levels, you can get a good idea if you need to make changes or not.
For somebody that's somewhere along that continuum of insulin resistance all the way to type 2 diabetes, and they're catching on to what we're talking about here about going into ketosis, measuring ketones, can somebody who is still on that insulin resistance spectrum, by adopting the diet and fasting, produce ketones? Or is that something that needs to be reversed before they get to that point?
They can. Yeah, they might have more of a challenge producing it, Jesse. But I've seen individuals with even full blown type 2 diabetes who've had it for years adopt this ketogenic approach combined with fasting, and they're able to produce ketones. Now, in general, as you lower your blood sugar levels, the more ketones you're going to be able to produce. You might have more of a challenge getting into therapeutic doses of ketones, which is over like 3.0 milliliters millimoles per liter, but you could still produce ketones. You could still get around zero point 0.6, zero point 0.7 over time as you become more insulin sensitive, start burning off the excess stored sugar and stored body fat. Those ketones will begin to rise. So it might take a little longer for that person to achieve the therapeutic doses of ketones, but you could definitely produce it.
All right. So, hypothetical example, somebody's type 2 diabetic. They start lowering the carbs, they start fasting, producing ketones at least to an extent. How quickly can they begin to reverse that and work their way back through insulin resistance, back to metabolic health?
It depends on the person and how long they've had it and how much metabolic damage they've done. It also depends on if they're on medication, right? So it is important if you are on meds, of course, work with your doctor. None of this is medical advice because what's going to happen is as you start to adopt a ketogenic lifestyle, maybe implement fasting with it, you're going to get healthier. You're going to lower inflammation, lower insulin. And if you're also taking metformin or blood sugar reducing meds or insulin, you could go hypoglycemic. So you want to speak with your doctor or your practitioner and de-prescribe, have them de-prescribe, lower the dose of your meds as you get healthy. But Jesse, to answer your question, I'll give you an example. Shannon, who's in my Keto Kamp Academy, within about 45 days, she went from being an insulin dependent diabetic to no longer having to rely on her insulin for her diabetes. 45 days, right? Pretty fast. And she had her diabetes for years. Now, that's not always the case. For some people, it could take a few months. And in rare cases, it could take a few years. But I would say in general, you could reverse this and get down the right path within a matter of weeks adopting this lifestyle.
For somebody who is insulin resistant right now, you mentioned the fact this can happen almost silently in the body over a number of years. What are some of the symptoms people can look to see if they are maybe in that boat? And then what are some of the silent things that are destructing our health happening in the background?
Some of the signs and symptoms of insulin resistance are the following. Skin tags. Skin tags are a problem. A lot of people get them around their eyelids, their neck, their back. That's usually a sign of insulin resistance. If you have a lot of skin tags, chances are you have insulin resistance. Brown patches around your armpit area and neck is also a sign of insulin resistance as well. This is a sign of glycation in the body. Another sign of insulin resistance is, of course, just having extra weight on your body, having more than 20 pounds of fat, a weight you want to lose. That could be a sign of insulin resistance. Feeling tired after eating a meal is a huge red flag that you probably have insulin resistance. Your body is overproducing too much insulin from the meal that you ate. Blood sugar goes up, you're overproducing too much insulin, and then the blood sugars drop, and then now you're in a hypoglycemic state and you feel tired. That's another sign of insulin resistance. And some of the lingering things that will occur, high blood pressure is one of the first things, as I mentioned, as you strip nitric oxide. Migraines are a common sign of insulin resistance and blood sugar imbalances as well. And then if that continues, of course, what happens is the insulin resistance turns into diabetes. And the thing about diabetes, Jesse, is that it's pretty rare to die from diabetes. It doesn't really happen. It's what the diabetes are connected to. It's the degeneration of that disease called diabetes. It's the amputation, the kidney failures, the cancer, the heart disease. It leads to all of that. But the great thing about diabetes, it's fairly easy to reverse. And when I say diabetes, I mean type 2. I'm not referring to type 1. It's fairly easy to reverse type 2 diabetes. You can do it in a matter of weeks to months as long as you change your lifestyle, because diabetes is a lifestyle condition that's unfortunately treated with medication. You can see there's a huge mismatch there. In order to reverse a lifestyle condition, you change your lifestyle. You implement ketosis, you implement fasting, you build lean muscle, you focus on sleep, you do all the things you need to do to lower inflammation in your body. So yeah, those are some of the signs and symptoms to pay attention to.
And not to mention, one of the treatment methods for type 2 diabetes is to inject more insulin and continue this cascade going the wrong way. Might be a temporary fix to bring the blood sugar down, but you're further causing that destruction.
That's exactly right. Right. And the doctor, and we're not against doctors. I love doctors. They do amazing work. Don't get me wrong. But when we think about what they're doing with diabetes, to your point, Jesse, you give the patient insulin, it improves their blood sugar levels. And they show that to you. And it does improve their blood sugar levels, but it's treating the symptom. Type 2 diabetes is not a blood sugar issue. It's a cell inflammation insulin issue, right? Just by taking insulin, you might improve your blood sugar levels, and they could pat themselves on the back and show that to you on blood work. But where is the sugar going? It's going into your cells. It's going into your organs. You're forcing your kidneys and your body to excrete it. That's a problem. It's not fixing. It's not getting to the cause. It's just masking the symptom.
Well, we've talked a lot about different ways to work our way back from that insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes. We'll group them all together for practical sake here. We know diet's a piece of this. You mentioned building muscle, fasting we've talked about. What would we say in a practical sense for that person that's somewhere on that continuum with those different conditions I mentioned, and they want to take action today and get better? What would you say practically would be the quickest, best way to get them back?
Getting some momentum, right? Making a tweak a week and just getting some momentum. I'm a big believer that you could actually make sustainable progress by mastering a couple of habits per week. One of the biggest things, Jesse, and I wrote about this in my new book, Metabolic Freedom, that's coming out in 2025. I wrote about this idea called self-image. And this chapter 10, it's all about how your thoughts influence your metabolism and fat loss and disease or even health. And we all have a self-image of ourselves. For example, I used to be obese, Jesse, for most of my life. I was physically obese, mentally obese. This is back in 2007. And even though I went through this incredible transformation of losing 80 pounds in 9 months and getting physically fit, the self-image I had of myself was that of an obese person, somebody who's overweight. So even though I was physically with a physical six-pack and looking in the mirror and looking at my six-pack abs, I still viewed myself as somebody that was obese, that was unhealthy. And I had to change my self-image of myself, because otherwise I would have found ways to go back to that old version of myself. And for the person watching and listening, this is the same scenario for you. If your self-image is that of a person who has diabetes, who's overweight, who's always going to be overweight, even though you start to make changes, you're going to find ways to course correct. Like an airplane that takes off from Toronto to Miami, there's an autopilot that the plane will go off course. The autopilot keeps course correcting and gets them to their destination. We do the same thing when we set goals. If we want to lose weight, for example, and we start to lose the weight, and our self-image is that of a person who's overweight, we lose 10 pounds, 15 pounds, we do keto, then we find ways to get the weight back. The weight that was lost is now found because we're still having the self-image of somebody who's overweight. You cannot outperform your self-image. So how do you change your self-image? You change it by affirmations. I know for some people, I'll say that and they're like, oh, no way. Affirmations, Ben, really? Affirmations. You tell yourself and you affirm that you're a healthy, lean person. And for me, Jesse, I have these affirmation cards and they've changed my life. I read my goal, I affirm the new version of myself, and it's one of the easiest, quickest ways to change the self-image. And here's what I would say, and I give an affirmation in the book. I say, I am so happy and grateful now that I am at my goal body weight. I'm lean, I'm healthy, I'm happy, right? You start to affirm that, you start to make the changes, and now you're not finding ways to sabotage yourself. You're not finding ways to gain the weight back. It isn't until you change that self-image that you're going to be able to change your life. So work on the self-image, number one. Number two is to look at the foundations of health: sleep, movement, your thoughts. These are all really important. You could do all the keto and fasting you want, but if you're getting crappy sleep, you're stressed out, you're not moving your body, it's going to be really difficult to achieve the results you want. So start to work on your sleep, work on the quality of your sleep more so than the quantity of your sleep. Get movement in. If you're currently getting 3,000 steps a day, good goal would be, okay, starting today, I'm going to get 5,000 steps per day. You master that for a few days, then you go to 7,000 steps a day and work your way up until you get about 10,000 steps per day. A lot of benefits by walking every single day. Then you work on your sleep. You master getting quality sleep. Then you go to the next thing. You start to lower your carbohydrates a little bit more and eventually get into ketosis. So I'm a big fan of small little tweaks that lead to giant peaks, Jesse, versus all these changes all at once, especially when somebody has a self-image of somebody that's unhealthy.
So it sounded like this, but I want you to confirm self-image should be the priority before these other steps, because you just shared a lot there. And for somebody that's in that category that I mentioned, type 2 diabetic or just extra weight and insulin resistant, likely all or a lot of this will be really new to them. So how do we prioritize everything you just shared there in a way that they don't get overwhelmed?
Your environment will determine your self-image, right? So your environment is very important. And I've seen and I've heard just in conversation people identifying with their condition. They're identifying as a type 2 diabetic, as somebody who's obese, in sort of a proud way, meaning they're speaking with other diabetics and comparing what medications they're on, right? There's kind of something proud about that I hear from these conversations. So when you identify with that and you're surrounded by other people that are kind of supporting that, it's going to be really difficult to change your habits, change your behavior, because here's how it works. Your environment determines the thoughts that you think, which is the self-images in that. The thoughts that you think and your self-image and your belief system determine the actions you take or don't take. Then it determines the results you get and ultimately your destiny. So it starts with the environment. You want to start to listen to more podcasts like Jesse's Ultimate Health Podcast. You want to surround yourself with people who are on board with you making these changes. You want to have your doctor needs to be supportive too. Your environment is the first step because that will determine the self-image, the thoughts, the actions, and essentially your results and your destiny. It's very difficult. I get it. You have people in your life who you love, you spend time with, and they like this version of you. And when you change, you become a threat to people in your life who don't change. It's the old crabs in a bucket story where you could put 20 crabs in a bucket without a lid, leave all 20 crabs in that bucket, come back in the morning, and all 20 crabs are still there. And you're wondering, why are they not escaping? Well, a few of them tried to escape, but when the other crabs saw them escaping, they would bring them back down into the bucket, right? We have people in our lives that are crabs in the bucket. We need to identify them. We need to change that. Surround ourselves with people that are going to support you. And that could just be podcasts and books. The more you could inundate your mind and create what Bob Proctor used to call brain tattoos of like good information, the more conviction you'll have. And then when people make comments saying, oh, keto, that's dangerous, you're going to have a heart attack, or oh my gosh, you're eating all that saturated fat, it'll just come off of you like water off of a duck because you have conviction. You've been studying. You know what's the truth. So Jesse, environment is the first most important thing. And then focusing on those foundations, tweaking that self-image and kind of going from there.
One of the challenges of the modern world is that the environment by default is against us in so many ways. You mentioned books and podcasts, whether it be certain wasted time shows on Netflix, the news, the fact that most of us are metabolically unhealthy. I think the number now, you mentioned it before, over 90%. And there's just so many things in the environment that work against us. So to create that environment takes effort in all these different areas. So it doesn't come easy. Doesn't mean it's not worth it. And that's not where we need to start, because I agree with you. But unfortunately, in today's modern world, none of it comes by default.
It's true. It's designed that way. I remember a whole old quote by Neville Goddard. He said, "We are only limited by weakness of attention and poverty of imagination." And our environment determines both weakness of attention and poverty of imagination. And when I lecture on stage, Jesse, I usually share a story about my mom, and I wrote about this in my book. Today's actually my mom's birthday. It's funny that I bring this up. And this story, every Thursday, I have dinner with my mom. Me and my fiance go to my mom's house. We have dinner with her. She makes this amazing dinner. I love spending time with my mom. But there's a problem. Right next to the dining room table is the living room, and the television is on. And my mom watches a lot of television. She watches the Hallmark Channel most of the time. And we're eating dinner, the television is on, and then you have the TV commercials. And we're just inundated by big pharma, big food, big pharma, big food on those TV commercials. So much so that I was just like blown away by the extraordinary amount of commercials coming from big pharma that I did my own little research. And I discovered that 75% of all of the TV commercials in the United States are funded by big pharma, 75%. And out of the 195 countries in the world, only 2 countries allow big pharma to market directly to the consumer via TV commercials, and that is the United States and New Zealand. And the remaining commercials are mostly big food, fast food commercials. All of this goes into our conscious mind, subconscious mind, influences our decisions. But if we're aware, it makes it a lot easier. Michael Beckwith said consciousness is being aware that you're aware. So I'm aware that this is happening on TV, and I protect my conscious and subconscious mind. Now, when I'm at my mom's, the TV's on, and nothing I can do about that. She wants to have the TV on. But when I'm at home, I control that environment. But once you become more aware about what's happening out there, you could protect that conscious and subconscious mind. But to your point, it's very challenging. It's very difficult. But just being aware of what's happening and making small little changes gets you in the right direction, Jesse.
So you mentioned what a typical week would look like for you diet-wise and how you have the one day on Sunday where you allow in more carbs intentionally. You mentioned having some eggs and cheese before our call here. Let's zoom in on a typical day, what you're eating and when you're eating. So when you're breaking your fast.
Yeah. So in the morning, about an hour and a half after I wake up, I have my coffee. I've been adding in collagen protein powder to my coffee, which technically breaks the fast. But my goal right now, I'm on a strength training program. My goal is to get enough protein throughout the day. And by having the 2 scoops of collagen, which is about 30 grams of protein in my coffee, helps me get to my goal. So I'll have that around 8:30, 9 a.m. Typically wait about an hour and a half, 2 hours after I wake up to have it. And then I'm in a semi-fasted state where I don't eat anything until usually around 12:30 noon. I'll work out in between that in a semi-fasted state with the exception of the protein, collagen protein. Then I'll have my lunch around 12:30 or noon. It's either eggs and like goat cheese or ribeye steak or some organic chicken wings with some like hot sauce. Sometimes I'll have that. And then I'll fast until dinner time. So I usually have about 2 meals per day. I'll have dinner around 5 p.m., usually steak, usually meat. I love red meat. I do really well with red meat. And it's usually fattier cuts of meat like ribeye or picanha, which is a cut of red meat. So that's typically what I have. And I usually eat 2 meals within about a 5-hour eating window. And then I'm giving myself at least 3 to 5 hours of fasting before bed, which is actually really important to do. You don't want to eat too close to bed.
You're wearing your blue light blocking glasses right now. So let's talk about specifically having that period of time without food, how that fits in, and then other things you're doing to enhance your sleep.
Yeah, one of the worst behaviors that we have that will lead to weight gain and also inflammation is eating right before bed. Many reasons why. Number one, when you eat right before bed, you're giving your metabolism energy. Your body wants to use that energy, but if you just go lie down and go to sleep, you're going to store that as fat. It'll slow down fat loss and arguably cause fat gain, weight gain. And it could lead to acid reflux, GERD, digestive issues because you're digesting food and now laying down. You're not vertical, you're horizontal. And that's also could lead to acid reflux and GERD. There's also a relationship, an inverted relationship between melatonin and glucose and insulin. Now, melatonin, Jesse, have you done a deep dive on your podcast on melatonin, by the way?
There's one coming out soon, and it's somebody who's been on your show, Dr. John.
Oh, yeah, he's the one. He's the one to talk about it, right?
So that'll be coming out soon, yeah.
So yeah, you learned about it. Melatonin is not just a sleep agent. It's one of the most important antioxidants and hormones we could take to buffer stress, buffer inflammation. Amazing for the mitochondria, just amazing for overall health. Every cell that has mitochondria, so every cell with the exception of red blood cells, use and produce melatonin. It's one of the most important, powerful antioxidants for the mitochondrial membrane. So when you eat food before bed, even if it's healthy food, there's going to be a glucose and insulin spike that suppresses melatonin. There's an inverted relationship. So you don't get the benefits of melatonin. It's going to interfere with your sleep. It's going to raise your body temperature. When you eat food before bed, it raises your body temperature, which is the exact opposite of what you want before bed. Because in order to get deep, fat-burning, restorative sleep, stage 4 sleep, your body temperature needs to drop 1 to 2 degrees. When you eat before bed, it increases. So you get less deep sleep. So you're going to wake up in the morning feeling hungrier, more groggy, and numerous studies show when you get poor sleep, the next morning you're going to have higher levels of cortisol. Glucose follows cortisol. You're going to have higher levels of the hunger hormone ghrelin, making you hungrier, and lower levels of the fat burning satiety hormone leptin. So when you eat, you're less full and you want to just keep eating more. It's a vicious cycle. And there's also another study from the University of Chicago that showed in healthy men, by these healthy men, giving them less than 5 hours of sleep each night, but for only a week, they had blood sugars of someone that was pre-diabetic, right? Because lack of sleep will lead to a lot of issues. It'll raise glucose and insulin, raise cortisol. So when you fast before bed, a rule of thumb would be no food at least 3 hours before bed. You give yourself enough time to digest the food, to produce melatonin, to lower your body temperature. It doesn't really interfere with your sleep. Now, if you could extend that to 5 hours like I do, that's even better. So I really believe it's important not to eat before bed. It's not aligned with our circadian rhythm and our hormones. We're more insulin resistant at night. It's actually better to have most of your calories earlier in the day. And this is actually something I would have taught differently 4 years ago, Jesse. I was a big advocate of skipping breakfast and having dinner. Now I believe it's better to have breakfast and lunch, and if you can, skip dinner. If you could just have more of your calories earlier in the day, you're going to benefit than having it later in the day.
All right, let's talk about the light piece. Again, coming back to your glasses, what you're doing throughout the day to enhance that part of your routine.
Yeah, so as you can see, for those watching on YouTube, I'm wearing these yellow blue light blocking glasses. The reason I wear these, and blue light's not necessarily bad when we get it from the sun. It's actually great for energy production and cortisol. But the blue light we get from these artificial lights, I have these two big lamps right here. I have these artificial lights all across my office here. That's junk light. Junk light is not good for you. And this blue light that comes from artificial light can be problematic. Your brain has to filter out the junk light. And I'm around junk light pretty much all day long. I do a lot of content like you, Jesse. So by wearing these blue light blocking glasses, instead of my eyes and brain having to filter out the junk light, the glasses do a majority of it for me. And the analogy is like a computer browser, like Google Chrome. I'm using Google Chrome right now. I don't know if you're like this, Jesse, but over time on my Google Chrome browser, I end up having 5 tabs, 20 tabs, 40 tabs. And I always think I'm going to go back to these different studies and all these tabs start popping up. And then my computer runs slower. So that's kind of what's happening to your brain and your body when you're getting too much artificial junk light. Your body and your brain is running slower because it has to filter out. It's using a lot of bandwidth to filter out all the junk light. And if I just closed out all of my tabs and just opened up one browser with one tab, my computer is going to run smooth, right? That's the same thing when you wear these glasses. It's like having just a couple tabs open. You're going to function much better. That's one thing you can do. Another thing you can do is getting outside and just getting sunshine. Like right before I hopped on the interview with you, I have a basketball hoop in my driveway. And I played basketball for about 45 minutes this morning. I got sunshine through my eyes, on my skin. The more sunshine you get, I'm sure Dr. John spoke about this, the more melatonin you start to store throughout the day. And then at night, you start to release it, which helps with sleep. At nighttime, it's the most important time to avoid the artificial junk light. There's some cool things you can do. So at nighttime, my yellow glasses turn into red glasses. The red is for nighttime, the yellow is for daytime. But on my phone, if you have an Apple phone, there's a way, and you could Google this, there's a way where you could change your settings where you hit this 3 times and then it turns it into a red light on your phone. So you're not getting the artificial light from your phone. You tap it 3 times after. There's a setting that you can do. Just Google it. I also wear the blue light blocking glasses that are red at night. I'm avoiding any kind of stimulation at night. I do my best to do that. Sometimes my fiance likes to watch these shows. Like we're watching this show called From, very stimulating, but it's better to watch something that's more casual at night. You don't want to increase your heart rate before bed. And you want to avoid screen time about 30 to 60 minutes before bed. If you wake up in the middle of the night to use the restroom, don't turn on the lights. Use the bathroom in the dark, or install red bulbs in the bathroom where you could see and not sacrifice your sleep and increase cortisol. So those are a few things you can do.
So you've emphasized the point we don't want to eat within that period of time before sleep. You happen to post a video today on your YouTube channel talking about different drinks that we can have before bed to enhance fat loss, including the banana tea. So I'll have you talk about that one.
Banana tea, that's a favorite there, right? And I want to give credit to Dr. Michael Bruce, America's Sleep Doctor. He's the one who told me about this many, many years ago. Banana tea is like nature's NyQuil, and it really helps calm the body, calm the nervous system, calm the mind, especially if you're somebody who has all of these racing thoughts at night. I know as an entrepreneur, you could probably relate, Jesse. You like have all these ideas and you want to just like go to work and implement these ideas. And at night before bed, it's not the best time to have that because it keeps you awake. But if you're worrying about things or something on your mind, it's preventing you from falling asleep. You have this long sleep latency where it takes you 45 minutes to fall asleep, an hour or so. Banana tea could really help. So the peel of the banana has more of these micronutrients, potassium and magnesium, than the banana itself. So what you want to do is grab an organic banana, leave the peel on, but cut off the ends of the banana and then cut it in half. Then you put the two halves into a pot of water, 2 cups of water, and you boil it for about 5 minutes. And what's going to happen is these micronutrients that help calm the nervous system, calm the mind, they begin to seep into the water as it boils. Then after 5 minutes, you pour the banana tea into a cup. You discard the banana or put the banana in the freezer. You're not eating the banana. This is still keto friendly, by the way. It doesn't break your fast as well. You're not eating food. It's not creating a blood sugar spike. You pour just the banana tea into a cup and you drink it. You sip on it. It has a mild banana flavor. You could add a little bit of cinnamon if you want. And it helps calm the body. It's like nature's NyQuil. So I'm a big fan of banana tea. And the reason I put it in that category as a fat burning drink is because it helps you get that deep delta fat burning sleep when you drink banana tea.
All right, Ben, so you've gone over what you'd eat in a week, what you'd eat in a day. You also do these periodic experiments with the carnivore diet. You've already mentioned your diet is basically carnivore most days of the week, but I want to hone in on this 90-day carnivore experiment you did about a year ago. You had blood work done at the beginning and the end, so you have everything measured, which is just fantastic. Let's talk about what led up to that and then what that process was like for you, how your body handled it.
I love how well researched you are, my friend. Good job. You're a fantastic podcast host. Respect. It was about a year ago, actually. It was October of 2023. And I had been doing variations of carnivore as a reset since 2019. I'll do 30 days of carnivore, 45 days, never did 90 straight days. And I never really did a whole bunch of lab work to kind of see some of the changes that would occur. One of the reasons why I wanted to do lab work is because so many people think that eating red meat and eating cholesterol and saturated fat will increase your risk of cancer and heart disease. And I know this is just one person doing one experiment, and my experiment could be different than somebody else doing the same experiment. But I wanted to show that I don't think this is the case. Research does not back this up, and I'm going to prove it just doing it on myself. So I decided, actually, I was going to do 30 days, Jesse, but I ended up doing 90. And right before I did the carnivore diet, I did a whole bunch of lab work. I did a $3,500 panel of blood work, a full lipid panel, particle sizes, HDL, LDL, particle sizes, triglycerides. I did my A1C, my fasting insulin, a full thyroid panel, full hormone panel, inflammatory markers. I did it all on day one. I also did a stool test on day one to look at my gut microbiome. I should back up a second and say, before this experiment, I was not doing what I'm doing now, where I'm primarily carnivore. I was probably doing keto 60% of the time and having a lot of vegetables. And I was not carnivore prior to this. Okay. So I want to let the audience know that's why it's important to state that. Now I am. But I did the experiment. So I did 90 days of carnivore, and the couple of interesting things happened. Let's start with the stool test. When I submitted the stool test on day one, I got the results back about 3 weeks into my carnivore experiment. And when I read the report, it looked at my gut diversity. And we know that the more diversity in your gut microbiome in general, the healthier you are. That's the name of the game, diversity. My diversity, when I tested on day one, came back as average. It was okay. It wasn't bad. It wasn't great. It was average. And the lab report gave me some recommendations to increase my gut diversity. And on that report, Jesse, it said less keto, less red meat, more plants, more fiber, more polyphenols, essentially more of a plant-based diet. What did I do? The complete opposite. I was doing carnivore, and I was full on in carnivore already 3 weeks in, going for my 90 days. So you would think that by not listening to what the lab said and doing the complete opposite and eating no fiber, no carbs, no plants, no vegetables, no polyphenols, that when I retested on day 90, it's going to be a disaster. Well, I retested on day 90 right before I broke carnivore, got the results back. And here's the interesting thing. Everything in my gut microbiome improved. My diversity improved. Not just that, 7 core bacteria showed up on my day 90 test that did not show up on day 1, and 5 keystone bacteria showed up on day 90 that was not there on day 1, doing the complete opposite of what most people think you need to do to improve gut health. I didn't have any fiber, Jesse. I didn't have any plants. I just ate red meat. I ate poultry. I had eggs. I had goat cheese, all animal products for 90 straight days. So that was the gut report. You want to ask a question on that before I get to the labs?
Let's talk about that before we move on. I think this was the most interesting piece for me to see this change. What do you think it was? Again, no fiber. Everything that we conventionally view about the microbiome is being shattered by this. And in all fairness, we have to throw the fact that diversity is good into the mix as well, because this is shattering everything. Your diversity did get better, and by conventional terms, that is a good thing. But what we're learning from this experiment is that maybe, some of these assumptions we have aren't even true. So this just shatters everything and makes for an unsturdy foundation in a good way. It's time to look deeper at this stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the chief scientific officer of this company that I did the lab test with was just surprised because I told him what I was doing. And he's like, I need to hop on a Zoom call with you to go over the results. And I did. And he was just blown away. He said it changed his whole perspective on how we view the gut microbiome. And this guy has spent 20 plus years in the space. I actually recorded that and published that in the video for the audience to watch. YouTube.com, just type in Ben Azadi Carnivore. It's the first video.
We'll link it up.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse. And I Dr. Pampa, who you had on your show, he kept asking me for months, did you get your results back? Did you get your results back? Because he was so interested in those gut microbiome results. And he was in Miami. We were recording some content together. He was coming over to my house, and he came over, and literally 5 minutes before he got here, the results came in. So we sat down in my office and recorded a short video, and I asked him why he thinks my diversity improved doing the complete opposite. And I agree with what his thoughts are. And here's what we think. We think the stress of removing all these plant toxins and fiber, the stress of being in continuous ketosis and just eating meat, it was a change to my gut microbiome, a stress that created diversity, more diversity. It forced the good bacteria to adapt and flourish. And then it created a scenario where the weak or bad bacteria did not survive. It kind of starved them out, right? So the change and the aggressive nature of this change and the stress, and this is a positive stress, we believe created this diversity in the gut microbiome. Now, I didn't stick with it. So I would hypothesize that if I did stick with this carnivore diet, strict continuous ketosis for 6 months or 12 months or 2 years, I would hypothesize, although I don't know this to be true, that I'd start to see the opposite results because then my body starts to adapt. And I think the change is the most important thing. It's the variation. This was a big change for my gut microbiome. So Jesse, I think that's what did it.
And have you had the same test done since? I'd be curious a year later, going back to, again, you mentioned your diet now is more carnivore, but what's happened with those different populations you've gained over that year?
Yeah, it's a good time to retest. Yeah. So here's what I'll do. When I come back on your podcast, I will have those results and we could go over the second results of that. The third results of them. Yeah.
Sounds good. And in theory, do we think the bacteria are feeding on the animal products? Or is it just a die-off and then a regrowth of the good guys? And an expansion, obviously, of new species too. But this might not be an area you're familiar with, but do you know if bacteria are feeding on animal products as well?
I think they're feeding off the butyrate from being in ketosis, right? The beta hydroxybutyrate, great for the gut. I don't know if they're necessarily feeding off like the animal protein. I'm not a gut microbiome specialist. It would be a good question for somebody who comes on your show. But the butyrate for sure, I know, great for the gut. And then the fact that my glucose levels and insulin levels were pretty stable. Like I know a lot of these bad bacteria feed off of high levels of sugar. Of course, candida feeds off of high levels of sugar. And I was starting off a lot of these bad bacteria. So I think the butyrate played a big role there, and the fact that my sugars were so optimal that these bad bacteria didn't have a chance to flourish.
All right, let's get into some detail of what each day looked like. Was there coffee involved? I know you're a coffee drinker. You've mentioned that. Electrolytes, salt, other supplements.
I had coffee, so I did do it with coffee. I didn't want to give up the coffee, Jesse. I did give it up for 2 weeks throughout the entire experiment, but outside of that, I had coffee. Um, Definitely kept my electrolytes and salt up because that's important. As you do ketosis or carnivore, what happens is you lower insulin, and your kidneys kind of go through this diuresis process where it sheds a lot of excess water weight along with electrolytes. So you could get into an electrolyte deficiency. So I was really intentional with having high quality electrolyte supplements, or putting like sea salt in my coffee is another thing you can do as well. I did a lot of fasting. Naturally, as I ate more meat, I was just not hungry, and actually was having a hard time getting enough protein because I was just so full and satiated. A lot of days I was doing, not a lot of days, but a few days I was doing one meal a day. I was just having one big meal, just because I was so full and satiated. When you eat a lot of protein and fat, you just feel so full and satiated. Now, I didn't want to do that. I was just naturally so full. I ate a lot of red meat. That was like the main thing: ground beef, ribeyes, New York strips with sea salt. I didn't add any other seasonings. I didn't do any carbohydrates. I didn't do any honey. I didn't do any fruit. It was strict carnivore for 90 days. And it was a challenge, Jesse, because it happened. I did it throughout the holidays. It was during Thanksgiving. It was during Christmas. And going back to that conversation earlier about the environment, like my family members did not like the fact that I was doing this. My mom did not understand it. They were making comments, but I have strong conviction, and I knew I was doing this experiment. I wanted to make it accurate. But yeah, in terms of supplements, what else did I had? I had collagen. I had magnesium, melatonin, the same old usual stuff, but nothing that contained any plants or vegetables in it.
Well, let's go deeper into the specifics of the diet because there's carnivore and then there's a whole bunch of different subcategories under that. The top being just having beef and salt. And you do talk about this in the video, but get into specifics of what your diet was like and did it change at all over the 90 days?
Yeah, there are about 4 or 5 different layers or levels to carnivore, like you mentioned. The level one, which is the most beneficial and the most extreme level, is what you said, the red meat and the salt. That's it, beef and salt. Beef tallow, and salt. That's more reserved for people that have autoimmune conditions, severe autoimmune conditions. It's really restrictive, but really powerful. Level two, a little bit more flexibility where you have beef, salt, and beef tallow, but then all animal products, including poultry, bison, lamb, like you open it up to all animal products and even seafood. Level three is everything I mentioned, plus eggs and dairy. Now, personally, I prefer sheep and goat dairy than cow dairy. So I did more of a level three where I had all animal products, eggs, seafood, and sheep and goat dairy. I did that for the majority of my 90 days. Then there's a level four carnivore, which is the most flexible one, where you have everything I mentioned, plus avocados, mushrooms, like Dr. Paul Saladino does, fruit. He's animal based. That's more flexible. That's more for somebody who doesn't have autoimmune, has a healthy metabolism, and you kind of just want to be animal based in that variation. So for me, I did more of a level three where I had all different animal products, seafood, eggs, sheep, and goat dairy. There were some days where it was level one, where it was just beef and salt. But for the most part, it was more of a level three, all animal products.
And would you say your diet day in, day out now after the experiment, is that more of a level four?
More of a level three, Monday through Saturday is more of a level three. Yeah, I'm doing seafood, dairy, eggs. So more of a level three.
And are you a stickler for quality? Organic, grass fed, grass finished? How do you look at that and incorporate those into your diet?
I prefer to get grass fed, grass finished, organic. I want to support that type of farming first and foremost, and it's just healthier for you. Now, when I go to restaurants, can't always find that. The safest bet at a restaurant, by the way, this is a good tip for your audience, is lamb, because lamb is always grass fed. So even if you're at a restaurant and there's a steak and a lamb shank or lamb chops, always go with the lamb. The worst option at a restaurant, if it's not organic, is chicken and pork. Those are the dirtiest animals out there. High omega-6 content, high levels of linoleic acid, which is the vegetable oil we spoke about earlier. That's the worst option if you cannot find organic. So if nothing's organic, the best option is lamb because that's always grass-fed. But yeah, to answer your question, when I order my foods, my meats, it's grass-fed, grass-finished. But when I go to restaurants, I'll just get a piece of steak, even if it's not grass-fed, grass-finished, or organic.
Right. And to further elaborate on what you mentioned there, that's the way I understand it as well, where ruminant animals, you're better off with those if you're going conventional. And then the omega-6 is skyrocket in things like pork and chicken when they're conventional. So just highlighting that.
That's exactly right. So if you're going to go conventional, avoid chicken and pork. Stick with lamb as your best option. Second best option is cow's beef.
All right, let's come back to your experiment here. We went over the microbiome piece. Things improved in that realm. Let's move into other things, body fat percentage, HRV, other things you tested.
Yeah, so I had the Oura Ring on the whole time. And I looked at my sleep scores, my heart rate variability. Then I also tested my body fat with an in-body electroimpedance scale. Not the most accurate, but it gave me some data. My body, I've dropped 6% body fat, meaning a total of 6% body fat reduction during the 90 days. And I didn't even realize that I needed to lose those 6% body fat, but my body did it. So I got really lean. My abs got more defined. I forget the amount of weight I lost.
16 pounds.
Oh, there you go, Jesse. There you go. I lost 16 pounds in the 90 days as well. So 6% body fat, 16 pounds. Thank you, Jesse. My heart rate variability improved dramatically. And that's a really important marker. It's one of my favorite markers to track is heart rate variability. Essentially, heart rate variability is giving you an idea of how healthy your nervous system is. We know that we have two branches to the nervous system. We have the sympathetic branch, fight, flight, cortisol, really important in short spurts. Then we have the parasympathetic branch, rest, digest, detoxification, elimination. With a low heart rate variability, it's showing that you are parasympathetically suppressed and sympathetic dominant, meaning you're too stressed out. So in general, you want to raise your heart rate variability. By doing so, you could actually do more biohacks. You could actually do more of the stressors that benefit your body. And I'd love to talk about that a little bit later. So I looked at my heart rate variability and it was already good and it had been improving over the years. But with Carnivore, it bumped up. It bumped up on average. It kept going up and the baseline was pretty good and it kept going back up. So overall, my HRV improved. My deep sleep improved. I got more deep sleep each night. I got more REM sleep, which is more for rapid eye movement sleep, more for memory processing, short-term memory to long-term memory. I was waking up less times throughout the night. I have sleep apnea from eating a poor diet my whole life. My teeth got crowded. I had a narrow mouth. Last 4 years, I've been wearing an expander. My face looks completely different. The teeth are getting straight, but I still have mild sleep apnea. So I look at that Oura Ring and it shows you that white little bar when you wake up, and that happens throughout the night. And less of that was happening with Carnivore. And I'm determined to completely reverse my sleep apnea as I fix my dental stuff. So my sleep improved, woke up less times throughout the night. Overall, Jesse, I just had amazing energy levels. Of course, I was in ketosis. And I think a lot of people don't understand that Carnivore is keto. Okay, because you're in ketosis when you do Carnivore. Keto is a metabolic process. So people think, I don't like keto anymore. I like Carnivore. Well, you're in ketosis when you're doing Carnivore. I have news for people who say that. So I felt good. My brain function was great. I was playing basketball. I was working out. I was strength training. I was recovering well. Man, I just felt overall great with Carnivore. My body responds really well to Carnivore.
A previous guest of the show, Bart K., mentioned that to get out of ketosis on a carnivore diet, you'd want to have a big bolus of food at one time, and that would trigger leaving ketosis, which he looked at as being a good thing. How do you look at that, or do you feel that's true?
Yeah, that can happen. Bart is correct, right? So he's referring to gluconeogenesis. I imagine, I don't know if you mentioned this, but he's probably referring to gluconeogenesis from the extra protein. Is that correct? Do you remember that?
To be honest, it's been a bit. I didn't know if it was I don't know. I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah, I doubt it was the caloric surplus because even if you increase your fat, like even in a caloric surplus, that won't bump you out of ketosis. And then you're not doing it with carbs. So the only thing is the protein. And when you eat a
Must
lot
have
of
been.
protein, yeah, when you eat a lot of protein all at once, some of that protein is converted into glucose via gluconeogenesis and it could bump you out of ketosis. And I don't think that's a bad thing. To his point, I agree. Now, 4 or 5 years ago, Jesse, when I used to teach keto, one of the things I used to teach is to eat moderate to low protein because I was worried that this gluconeogenesis could kick you out of ketosis. And at this time, I didn't want that to happen for people. I wanted them to stay in ketosis. But I discovered through testing a lot of people and also my own research and testing on myself that it's really difficult to do that. For example, if you had 100 grams of protein in one meal, which I could easily do, about 60 grams, 60% of those grams will be converted into sugar via gluconeogenesis. So you would think, yeah, that's enough to bump you out of ketosis, 60 grams of carbs or sugar. However, if you're already going into that meal in a ketogenic state or a fasted state, your glycogen stores are very low or depleted, which is your sugar reserves in your muscle and liver cells. So the excess glucose just replenishes the glycogen stores, doesn't necessarily raise your blood sugar levels enough to bump ketones down. So you can do that. Bart is correct if you have enough protein all at once to create the gluconeogenesis, but it's really difficult to do. You know, Jesse, 2 weeks ago, I was in Tampa for Dr. Pompa's conference. He had a conference where they live streamed it from a studio in Tampa, and I drove up because I was speaking there. And I was having dinner with Pompa and his son Simon, and we got into this debate about protein. Like his son Simon just likes to get under people's skin in a fun way, and he was just making fun of me because at the steakhouse I had a piece of a 22-ounce ribeye, and then one of our friends, Andrea, didn't finish her steak, so I had half of her steak. And he was like, "Oh my gosh, you're having that much protein, gluconeogenesis, it's bad for your kidneys." And they were like having fun about it, right? And Pampa was joining in on this. And we got into this debate about protein. He was saying Simon was saying protein can make you fat, protein can cause a blood sugar spike. But we came to the conclusion that it's really difficult to overeat protein. It's so filling and satiating that it's hard to do that, Jesse. Even 100 grams is hard to do for most people. So, yeah, can you bump yourself out of ketosis on carnivore by eating enough protein? You can, but it's not as common as you think.
All right, let's come back to HRV. You got into what that is, but what about on a day you wake up, you look at your Oura ring on your phone, your results, you see that it's low. What would you do to take care of yourself or to put yourself in a better position throughout the day?
Yeah, I love that you asked this question. It all boils down to hormesis, right? And I think a lot of people in our space have heard the word hormesis, but they don't really understand it, right? Every biohack that we do is a stress. It's a positive stress. When your body adapts to you get stronger. That is staying in this hermetic zone. For example, red light therapy, sauna, cold plunge, fasting, ketosis, carnivore, exercise, PEMF mats. These are all stressors to your body. Are they bad? No. If you do too much and don't adapt, then it becomes bad. You drop out of this hormetic curve. So hormesis essentially means a stress that you apply, you adapt to the stress, and you get stronger. Going back to HRV, heart rate variability lets you understand if you're adapting to the stressor. So if I woke up this morning and my HRV was below baseline, then today would be a day where I do not apply too many stressors. It might be a day where I don't do much fasting, I do more feasting, I don't do my fasted workout, or if I do, I take it easy. It's a day where I take the foot off the pedal just a little bit. If I see my HRV at baseline or above, I'm going to push myself. This is a good day to do my cold plunge, to do my infrared sauna. So I did my infrared sauna today. I did my fasted workout today. I got the sunshine today because it was a good HRV day for me. So it's a good gauge. The higher HRV, the more fasting you can do, the more of these biohacks you can do. The lower your HRV, you have no business doing all these biohacks. I mean, you ask the average person who teaches people how to cold plunge, and they're all over the place, A beginner goes to a cold plunge coach and asks them, it's my first time. How long should I go? Oh, 3 minutes. Wrong answer. All right. That is too much of a stress for that beginner to do. They might need to do 2 seconds or 10 seconds, adapt to the stress and kind of go from there. So hormesis is the name of the game. You want to stay in this hermetic zone. When you stay in this zone, that's where you thrive. And I could unpack that more if you want. But yeah, that's how I view my HRV, Jesse.
All right. So you mentioned it from taking your foot off the gas if you notice it's low. Things you'll do when you have a higher HRV to get the hormetic benefit. But on a day that it's low, other than taking your foot off the gas, are there things you can do that day, like having an Epsom salt bath, taking time to meditate, things you'll do to give yourself extra self-care, for lack of a better word, to bring that back up?
Yes, absolutely. Great question. Yes, oxytocin. Anything you can do to raise the hormone, the love hormone, oxytocin will help you get that HRV back up. Oxytocin has an inverted relationship to the stress hormone cortisol. So all of those things you mentioned, Jesse, elicits an oxytocin response, an Epsom salt bath, a meditation, a favorite hobby that you enjoy doing, whether that's like coloring or a game that you play with a partner, petting your dog, you get an oxytocin release. Walking out in nature, you get an oxytocin release. The best way to get an oxytocin release and raise your heart rate variability and lower inflammation and extend your lifespan is to take vitamin G. Because when you take vitamin G, you get all those benefits in a matter of seconds. Vitamin G has been studied, and Dr. Joe Dispenza has studied vitamin G. He's taken people through vitamin G workshops where they would take vitamin G twice a day for 4 or 5 days. He would measure their cortisol levels. He would measure their immune system via the IgA measurement, which is protective for the immune system. And he saw after taking vitamin G for just a few days, cortisol levels dropped, their immune system built up in just a matter of days. He also has seen 1,200 chemical processes take place instantaneously in the brain, in the body, when you take vitamin G, oxytocin, GABA, dopamine, serotonin, all these feel-good chemicals and hormones. Studies show those who take vitamin G live longer than those who don't take vitamin G. Vitamin G lowers blood pressure, lowers blood sugar levels. So I know your audience is thinking, man, I'm going to go to the show notes and look for this vitamin G coupon code. Where can I get it? Well, vitamin G is the practice of gratitude. You can see it on my shirt. We talked about it before we hit record. It is the feeling of gratitude. And all those studies were on gratitude. It's not woo-woo. This is scientifically proven. When you practice gratitude, it's the quickest way to raise oxytocin in your body, to raise heart rate variability, to put your body in a parasympathetic state. But I would caution that vitamin G, gratitude, is not an intellectual practice. It is an emotional practice. It's not about a checklist of I'm grateful for this, I'm grateful for this. No, it is the feeling of gratitude. So instead of writing down 10 things you're grateful for, I would prefer if you chose 1 or 2 things or 2 people that you're grateful for and spend a whole minute on why you're grateful for that person. So Jesse, yeah, oxytocin is what you want to do on those days where your HRV is low.
Before we leave this piece, because you are an expert and do focus a lot on this, given your t-shirt there, and I just know this is a big thing for you, I want to make sure practically we can really translate this for people. And you got into it a bit there with don't just write it down, but feel it. But get into more of what you mean by that and how often you'll do that throughout the day. Yeah, more specific so people can really leave this having this as a tool on their tool belt.
Love it. In the book, Metabolic Freedom, I have vitamin G dosage, and I'm going to give that to your audience right now. Your audience gets the first sneak peek on that vitamin G dosage, the best way to get the vitamin G.
Nice.
It's a 3-minute routine. You do it in the morning, once a day. That's it. And the reason you do it in the morning is because that's when your subconscious mind is most impressionable, most influential. And the subconscious mind runs the show. We spoke about it a little bit earlier. So by doing it in the morning, you're going to get the most results. Do it before you look at your phone, before you start your day. And what you want to do in this 3 minutes, you want to spend 1 minute on a relationship, a memory, a moment, a thing you're grateful for. And you want to bring as many emotions and feelings into that relationship, thing, or person for that 1 minute, right? And if you have trouble doing that, because some people do, Jesse, I have this question sometimes. I have trouble feeling the gratitude. Like, what can I do? Imagine that person being taken away from you. Imagine that situation. Imagine your right arm being taken away from you. You're going to have gratitude for that right arm, right? So if you could imagine something being taken away, then you have more of appreciation for it if you struggle with it. But spend a minute on that person, and then move on to the next thing. You want to find 3 different things, memories, people, things in your life. Spend a minute on each, bring in as much emotion. So 3 minutes, that's your vitamin G dosage. You do that every single morning, and here's what's going to happen. You rewire your entire brain. There's a part of your brain called the reticular activating system. It's the size of your pinky right here in your brainstem. This is what God put in your brain as a selective seeking mechanism to filter out all of the stimulation that we get. There are millions of things that the brain needs to filter out every day. If we didn't have a mechanism in place like the RAS to filter out everything, the brain would short circuit. We would not be able to focus and stay alert and stay alive during the years where we had to find our predator, or run away from our predator, or find our prey. So this RAS is trained. We've trained this software system in the brain to see what we've taught it to see. I'll give you an example. I'm in the process of buying a new car, and it's an Audi. It's let's just say it's a red Audi, although it's not, but red is a good example. And I've been on autotrader.com, going to dealerships. I've been putting a lot of energy and bandwidth and research into a red Audi for a few weeks now. And I haven't bought it yet, but I've been putting a lot of energy into this. So now I've noticed, Jesse, when I'm driving around the streets of Miami, there are these red Audis popping up all over the place. I'm at a stop sign, and the car driving across from me is a red Audi. I'm on the highway, and the car right next to me is a red Audi. And I'm thinking, man, I never noticed these red Audis before, but now they're everywhere. Why is that? Well, because I've trained my RAS to now see it. All right? How does that work with gratitude? The more we appreciate things, the more it appreciates. Universal law, what you feed energy to expands. So the more you have gratitude for something, the more gratitude you're given. The opposite is true. When you're not grateful, when you're resentful, when you're angry, you've trained your RAS to see all these problems, and all you get are these problems. All you get are these situations that make you angry. And when you switch over to getting that vitamin G every single morning, now all of a sudden, all the problems you had are now opportunities. All the obstacles are now opportunities. All the stressings are now blessings. And you retrained that RAS to see the gratitude in everything. And there's always something to be grateful for. This doesn't happen overnight, but I promise you, as you get your vitamin G every morning, week after week, month after month, you're going to be a grateful person. You're going to be talking about vitamin G to your friends. You're going to be sharing it with them. It'll change your life. You know, I was walking my dog the other day, and I thought, man, gratitude is strength training for the soul. It's the quickest way to strengthen the soul, strengthen the heart. And I believe it's the missing piece for a lot of people looking to get healthy.
I love that. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
Early in the conversation, we talked about affirmations, and I wanted to come back to that. And I think this is a good piece in the conversation to bring it back in. In a practical sense, how does somebody do that? Time of day, what exactly does that look like? And for you, does that fit in alongside the gratitude piece? Is this something you do around the same time, or how, just basically, how do you fit this into your day?
Yeah, I mean, you can. For me, the affirmation thing, I keep, it's an affirmation card, and you could actually just get a simple index card and write down, and I like writing it down in the present tense. I'm so happy and grateful now that, and write down your goal. One of the things I wrote in the book is, I'm so happy and grateful now that I have achieved my goal weight. The perfect health I seek is now seeking me. That's the affirmation I gave in the book. So you would write that down, or whatever affirmation you want, and you would keep it with you in your pocket, and you would just pull it out and read it throughout the day. Read it as many times as possible. The more focus and feelings and intention you put into reading it, the faster it's going to manifest for you. So the affirmation you would have on a card, and just read that as often as possible. When you go to the bathroom, pull it out, read it. I just keep it with me. It just changes your brain. The gratitude piece, you simply need to do it in the morning when you wake up. 3 minutes, 1 minute each, gratitude moment. Now, the more you do of it, the better, right? That's always a good thing. But you could tie in the affirmation part right after the gratitude as well, if you want. But with the affirmation, I like having that with me throughout the day. Keep it in your pocket. And every time you just pull it out of your pocket, you read it, put it back. Every time you feel it in your pocket, you read it. And the more you do that, and the more focus you put on that, the more you take this idea, this desire, this want of what you want to achieve, because wants and desires are in the conscious mind. Your expectations, your self-image is in the subconscious mind. As soon as you take that want and desire from from the conscious mind to the subconscious mind through affirmations, it manifests for you. You don't sabotage yourself. You find ways to make it happen. You crush your goals. And you could do this not just for health, you could do it for everything in your life. These affirmations I have on here for myself are not health related personally, they're actually business related goals. And I got to tell you, man, it's been crazy. I've been doing this for years, and every single time the goal is achieved. And these are goals that are just crazy goals, but I've done the work, and I really believe in this, Jesse. So the affirmation card, carry it with you. The gratitude, do it every morning.
Can you give us an example of one you had in the past that you achieved?
Yeah. So, for example, you could relate like the YouTube, the silver plaque, right? Like that was a goal I had, right? I'm so happy and grateful now that I have over 100,000 subscribers on my Keto Kamp YouTube channel. Like when I wrote that, man, I had just started my YouTube channel. Like it was just so far out there, right? Now, I don't know if you saw my phone earlier when I shared the little screenshot. Like I have this is photoshopped. I have the gold YouTube plaque, and it says, congratulations for Keto Kamp, 1 million subscribers. Like this hasn't happened yet, right? This is a Photoshop photo, but I keep it in front of me and I have that as my goal card, right? And that's going to be the next thing I achieve. So I'm telling you, it works really well when you do it consistently.
I did see that earlier, and I thought that might be what it was. So very cool.
Yes. Yeah.
So how many at a time, and how often are you changing them?
I would start with one at a time. I have two personally, but I've been doing this for a while. I would start with one, the most important thing. And now if it's health related, start with the health thing. And I didn't mention this, so I'm glad you asked that question. You would put a date at the top of when you want to achieve this. And you're just guessing. So just put a date and be bold on that date. And if you get to that date and you haven't achieved it, which has happened to me, you just change the date again. But you have the date and you keep reading it until you achieve the goal. And then you add a different goal and have a different affirmation. That's the way I would do it.
All right. I want to come back to the experiment. 90 days, you basically gave the gut microbiome a break in a way by narrowing down your diet. Diversity increased. It got healthier. Now that you're back on more of a quote unquote normal diet, how do you look at the microbiome? Are you including fermented foods, probiotics, fiber? I'm assuming not the latter, but how do you look at the microbiome as a whole? And are you doing anything to establish that in a healthy way?
I still don't understand the gut microbiome, to be honest with you. I just feel like we're just like the early stages of really understanding it. But I like the idea of retesting, like you mentioned, and seeing what's happening now with this new change. I love fermented foods. I think fermented foods are great. These prebiotic foods, feed the good guys, big fan of it. Now, if you have histamine issues and you're histamine intolerant, you want to go really slow with fermented foods like sauerkraut and kimchi and kefir, but I like them and I have them from time to time. I do have fiber when I have those, but outside of that, I'm not really having fiber, with the exception of that flex day, because I'm having fruit, I'm having carbs, I'm having my favorite masa corn tortilla chips, which is seed oil free beef tallow, which is fiber. And that's usually what I have on a flex day. But my idea around the gut microbiome, I still believe that stressing it is beneficial through dietary changes, through fasting, through sauna, through cold exposure. I think stressing the gut microbiome is beneficial. I've seen that to be the case for myself. I've seen that with other people. But I don't know. Like some people could eat fiber and they're going to increase their gut microbiome diversity. They're going to see improvements. Some people do the complete opposite. Me, they improve their gut microbiome. I don't know, Jesse. Like, where do you stand with the gut microbiome? Because you've interviewed a lot of people, and to me, I'm still kind of confused about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's an area of interest, and I definitely talk to a lot of people about it, but I don't have it figured out by any means.
Me too,
And
man.
my
I'm there with you.
perspective on a lot of things in this realm continues to change. So yeah, I'm just continuing to, read about it and ask my guests about it and learn, but a lot to learn in that realm.
Unlearn and relearn. That's the space we're in right there.
Exactly. So for you, a lot of good things happened during the 90 days. Any negatives?
Well, any negatives? Any negatives? Yeah. I mean, I guess having Thanksgiving with your family and friends and not being able to eat all the amazing food was kind of a challenge and a negative. Same thing for Christmas dinner. I had two Christmas dinners and I had to eat only meat. I chose to only eat meat. That was a little challenging. Socially, it's challenging for sure. You go to dinner parties, you get invited to things, and you're only doing carnivore. It's people don't understand it. It could be challenging socially. So that is a negative for sure. But I did it and I was committed to doing it. And you could do it too if you commit to it as well. Other than that, yes, another thing. I had diarrhea. I had diarrhea a few times. And that could happen. I've seen that happen for a lot of people actually, and especially in the beginning. So you might get diarrhea the first week as your gut microbiome is adapting. Adding in some ox bile supplementation could help with that. Usually, I would say add in bitter rich foods, but that's not carnivore. Apple cider vinegar could help with that. And I would add that to a carnivore approach. I think that's fine. So I did have some diarrhea, some loose stools the first couple weeks. Another negative would be basketball. In the beginning, I play every Sunday. I play basketball at the park in Miami Beach with some friends outdoors. Fasted 2 hours outside. It's hot in Miami. First couple of weeks doing that with carnivore, I would bonk. I would hit a wall, and I would not have that burst that I had before carnivore. So that was kind of negative. I discovered that taking exogenous ketones before basketball, even during carnivore, really helped with that. And then as my body adapted to carnivore, I had no issues. Outside of that, Jesse, no, everything else was positive, and I could talk about the labs as well if you want.
Well, one lab I definitely want to get into is LDL. I know
Yes.
that skyrocketed. From hearing you talk, I know that's not a concern for you and a lot of other people in our world. But talk about what you saw there and how you look at that.
Yeah, LDL was one of the markers I took. I took total LDL and I did the NMR profile, which looks at the LDL particle sizes. So, most conventional doctors and cardiologists believe that high LDL is a contributing factor to heart disease. That's usually the way most people think. And the first thought is like, we have to lower the LDL. We got to get you on a statin. So, my LDL on day one, I believe, was around 250 on day one, which was still pretty high because I was still doing more of a keto saturated fat approach. So it was still high. On day 90, it went up to 350, super high. Oh my gosh. However, I did the LDL particle sizes, which is very important to do because total LDL, just like total cholesterol, is kind of meaningless. It doesn't give you enough data. So the particle sizes looks at two patterns of your LDL particles. Pattern A, which is good, large, fluffy, goes right through the arteries, supports the immune system. It's been linked to actually longevity. Then we have the pattern B, B as in bad, which is the small sticky particles that could get lodged into your arterial wall, creating damage to your blood vessels, contributing to heart disease. So when I did the particle sizes on day one and on day 90, most of my particle sizes were the pattern A, large and fluffy, the majority of them, almost 90% plus, which means although I had high LDL, the majority was the good kind of LDL. The small sticky was really low and it got even lower on day 90 of carnivore. And I interviewed and I had Dr. Philip Ovadia review the results, who's a heart surgeon. And he said essentially on day one, you were at low risk of heart disease. On day 90 of carnivore, your risk dropped even more for heart disease. So, man, and all my inflammatory markers improved. But yeah, the LDL piece, you show that to any doctor, they would freak out, right?
And we know that you didn't retake your microbiome test since. Have you redone the blood work since?
No, I'm due for that. I'll do both, actually.
Okay. I'm curious on the LDL piece. Again, not out of concern, but just when you introduce more carbs, likely that's going
I
to come
think it'll
back down.
drop.
I
Yeah,
think so.
I think so too.
Any other noteworthy results that you want to share?
One of the markers that I tested for was high sensitivity C-reactive protein. And it's an inflammatory marker. And on the actual report, it actually shows that this test is an assessment for a future cardiovascular event, meaning heart attack, stroke, heart disease. It's a really important metric that cardiologists look at to see if you're at risk of heart disease. My C-reactive protein was under zero point 0.5 on day one, really good, really optimal. And on day 90, it was still under zero point 0.5. Right. So just looking at that, you could kind of show a cardiologist, like I ate nothing but saturated fat and cholesterol, and it didn't change my C-reactive protein. I think it went up just a little bit, but it was still optimal on day 90. So that right there was important. My fasting insulin was 3.3 on day one, 3.2 on day 90. Again, a really important metric. My A1C dropped a point. It was already optimal and it got even better. Everything improved. And, I have the full report on my YouTube channel for anybody to go see it too.
Yeah, and again, we're going to link that up in the show notes. So the obvious question, and we've gotten a bit of a taste for, I think, where you're going to go with your answer because of your Sunday changing your diet up thing. Why not stick on this diet long term? Things turned out great. Obviously, there's a social aspect. And then again, adding on the fact that you do believe from early in the conversation, there is a benefit to changing things up on Sunday. Did you consider just continuing the diet long term?
I didn't consider it, but I did change my routine because before that experiment, I was not doing what I'm doing now, where I'm carnivore Monday through Saturday, not carnivore Sunday. It convinced me to do that sort of variation. But there's a couple reasons why I don't want to do it long term. And I could be wrong here, but I've worked, as I mentioned, with over 5,000 people, taking them through a keto process. And every single one of them that stuck with ketosis long term, we saw some negative things happen, right? For men, we saw their testosterone drop. For women, we saw thyroid issues. And then for both, we saw weight loss stalls and even weight rebound. We saw cortisol issues. We saw adrenal issues. That's because, and I know we have mutual friends that I love and respect, Ken Berry and Dr. Sean O'Mara, and guys that I love and share stages with. They will disagree with what I'm about to say, but that's because ketosis and carnivore is a stress to the body. Short term, great. You're in that zone of hormesis. Long term, you fall out of that zone, I believe, and then bad things start to happen. That's one reason why I don't want to do it long term. The second reason is because I believe in metabolic flexibility. That is the ultimate goal for me. And I think for everybody I want to teach is metabolic flexibility. That is having a metabolism that is able to use any substrate that is available, whether it's sugar or fat, glucose or ketones. To me, there are two types of metabolic inflexibility. For the majority of people, that variation is only burning sugar. You're metabolically inflexible because you're stuck burning sugar. For the people that are long-term ketosis and long-term carnivore, it's another variation because you're stuck only burning fat. You forgot how to burn sugar. I never want to be in any of those camps. I want to be able to burn sugar when I want, enjoy myself with healthy carbs, and use it eat it at social occasions, and then go right back to burning fat and ketosis, doing carnivore. So for me, this is more sustainable, and I prefer this approach to more of a long-term keto or carnivore approach.
So far throughout the conversation, you've changed your mind on a few things over the years. One being not staying in ketosis long term. Two being prioritizing protein. Three is now you're more of a carnivore-ish diet after this experiment we've been talking about. Any other major changes since you've come into this keto world that you've changed your mind on?
Yes, good job. Great breakdown of what I changed my mind on. I even forgot. Well done. I would say, yeah, vegetables. I used to be big on a green leafy vegetable ketogenic approach. Spinach, kale, almonds. Oh my gosh, that's a big one that I changed my mind on. Almonds. I am not a fan of almonds personally, and I tell all my students to avoid almonds. And that's because of the anti-nutrients, the oxalates, the phytates, the lectins. 4 or 5 years ago, I was not aware of how bad they are for you. And I would promote a very vegetable, green leafy vegetable, oriented ketogenic approach. Now, my focus is more on a low oxalate sort of ketogenic approach. So not necessarily carnivore, but eating more arugula, broccoli, Brussels sprouts versus kale, spinach. And in terms of nuts and seeds, I do not recommend almonds anymore. They are loaded with anti-nutrients as well. For me, Jesse, I was eating so many almonds, and a lot of these keto breads and keto pizzas are loaded with almond flour that I was getting these styes in my eye. Oh my gosh. Have you ever gotten a sty, Jesse?
No,
They
I
suck.
know of them, but I've never had one,
Yeah.
thankfully.
They're so painful and they're ugly. Your eye swells up. And this kept happening to me. And I kept wondering why. And it was my body's way. My body was trying to get rid of these oxalates by shoving it out through a sty. And it was because of the amount of almonds that I was eating. So once I stopped eating almonds and switched over to more low oxalate vegetables, haven't gotten a sty since. So that's one thing I changed my mind on. I'm not a big fan of almonds anymore.
All right, we touched on biohacking before, and I know through digging into your work, you're a fan of biohacking with some of these different substances like methylene blue, and
Yeah.
you've had Nathan Bryan on your show as well, and I believe you've at least tested out his supplements for nitric oxide. Talk about that aspect because you have this really unique paradigm where you're keto, almost carnivore, but you're also into the biohacking. And I just think altogether where you've evolved to is a really interesting place. So I want to bring the biohacking piece in, talk about what you're experimenting with these days.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. It is an interesting evolution for me. Love Nathan Bryan's nitric oxide lozenges. I use that cyclically. I do a lot of supplements. I rotate them, and I go on and off of supplements. But in terms of biohacks, some of my favorite biohacks that I personally do on a consistent basis are red light therapy. I'm doing that every single day. I have a red light therapy panel right here. I have an infrared sauna that I use as well that has red light therapy. I use that most days. I have a cold plunge in my backyard. I use that maybe 2 or 3 times per week. It's not something I do every day. And I love these supplements that we could call biohacks. I love methylene blue. My nails are actually blue from taking it before the conversation here. I use Dr. John's product, by the way, methylene blue. And I love methylene blue because it helps my brain function well. It feeds my mitochondria. It's great for inflammation. So methylene blue is something that I take often. You combine methylene blue with red light or sunshine, like it really enhances the effects as well. I love my coffee with caffeine. I love different supplements that I take, like the nitric oxide. I'll take creatine. Big fan of creatine. I'll take 7 grams of creatine per day. I could go through a whole list of supplements that I take. But yeah, biohacking is important. I think biohacking is great. I just think people overdo it sometimes. They don't understand that it's a stress. You want to feel better after a biohack, not worse. If you do a cold plunge and you feel wiped out, you did too much. It was too cold. You should not do that again until you've built up this hormetic ceiling. And one of the best ways to know if you're building up your hormetic ceiling is tracking your HRV. It tracks exactly the same way. The higher your HRV, the more biohacking, the more fasting. The lower your HRV, the less biohacking, the less fasting. So I love biohacking, Jesse. I think it's amazing that we are in this space and we could get all these amazing results in half the time. I have all these amazing biohacks and I'm blessed and grateful for it, but you got to use them the right way.
Talk more about the creatine piece. I think you said you're around 7 grams a day. Is that primarily for the cognitive benefits, the physical? I'm assuming both, but what is your main reason for taking that?
It's primarily for the fitness benefits. That's why I started to take it because I'm on a strength training program and lifting more weights, eating more protein. And I know it's great for strength training, muscle recovery as well. And also, it's just great for the mitochondria. So, like you mentioned, the brain loaded with mitochondria. So, I like the way I feel with creatine. I think creatine is one of those supplements that both men and women should take. It's safe, it's cheap. There's thousands and tens of thousands of studies on them. Women usually take around 3 to 5 grams of creatine per day. Men, 7 to 10 grams. These are just general kind of suggestions here. I'm around the 7 gram mark and I take it pretty consistently. I usually take it before my workouts or before basketball is what I do.
One area I want to hit on a little bit deeper before we part ways is the exercise physical activity piece, which we're going to spin off with the creatine there. We talked about metabolic health early in the conversation. I want to bring this in that realm. Somebody that wants to become more metabolically healthy, tying in the resistance training, putting on muscle with that piece.
It's a really important piece, Jesse. We know that muscle mass, the more muscle mass you have, the more insulin sensitive you are. And with 93% of Americans being insulin resistant, that is really important. Muscle mass acts as a sponge to absorb glucose, so you don't have to overproduce insulin to clear that glucose. The more muscle mass you have, the less likely you are to fractures, osteopenia, osteoporosis, which is a big problem as we age. Muscle mass is, as we know, a longevity organ. And when we talk about muscle mass, and I know when I had my CrossFit gym, the idea of muscle mass usually is equated to like a CrossFitter or a bodybuilder, but that's not what I'm referring to here. I'm referring to lean muscle mass, not becoming a bodybuilder or a CrossFitter. And it's not that difficult to build lean muscle mass. It does not require an hour at the gym every single day. As a matter of fact, less is actually better. Less is more in this scenario. You just want to be really intentional with your workouts and really consistent and have something that's creating a resistance. So if you're a beginner, you would just use your body weight. You would just do, for example, squats, body weight squats. And if you have issues doing that, you could modify that and just sit down on a chair and stand up. That's your modified version of a squat and kind of build your way up. You could do push-ups, no equipment required. You could do altered lunges with just your body weight. You could do planks. You could do burpees. You could do sprints. Then we could take it to a next level where you add some weight to the routine. And you want to gradually increase the weights over time so your body does not reach a homeostasis. It has to continue to adapt. In general, 3 or 4 times a week, 30 minutes each workout is enough to get the job done. You just want to make sure you're getting enough sleep and recovery on those days. You're tracking the HRV as well. And as you do that, as you get enough protein, take your creatine, you're going to notice amazing benefits with your blood sugar levels, with your overall energy levels. And of course, it's going to also, I believe, extend your lifespan.
Ben, I think we should leave it here for today. We'll have you back on the show like we talked about, talking about those test results, the new book, which I can't wait to read. In the meantime, we're going to link everything up in the show notes, your YouTube channel, your social media. We referenced a couple different things throughout the chat. We're going to link those up as well. And I just want to end with gratitude for you and coming on the show and sharing what you shared. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Jesse, I'm a big fan. I've been a huge fan of yours. You're a great, exceptional podcast interviewer. Thank you for having me on. I have vitamin G for you as well.
Now that you're done, you're going to want to stick around here and catch this other incredible episode. You don't want to miss it. I'll see you over there.
They ignored the trials showing the low-fat diet didn't work. They ignored the trials showing that replacing saturated fat with unsaturated vegetable oils did not have any effect on reducing heart disease or cardiovascular mortality. And that's the way they